I think we're ready to start. Welcome, everyone, to this afternoon's information session on the Woodman Family Foundation Housing Stability Grants for Artists program for 2026. I'm Molly Quinlan Hayes, Program Officer at NYFA, and I'm joined today by Director of Grants, Sarah O'Connell.
Hi, thank you, Molly. My name is Sarah O'Connell. I'm the director of NYFA Grants, and I use she, her pronouns. I'll be joining mostly on the back end today. We'll be adding some links in the chat, and then also we'll pop back on at the end to join Molly for the Q&A. If you do want to ask questions throughout the presentation, you can do so at any point by using the Q&A function on Zoom. It should be on the top or the bottom of your Zoom screen. So feel free to click on that and submit your question, and we'll get to them at the end. But before I pass it back over to Molly for the presentation, I'll give a general intro to NYFA, if you can. Thank you, Molly. Oh, and then I guess I can go over the agenda too. So yes, I'm going to do my general intro, and then I'll pass it back over to Molly for the bulk of the presentation. She'll discuss the accessibility and privacy of this program, a general grant overview, then go over the eligibility criteria to see if you are indeed eligible for the grant, the application requirements, and then we'll look at the actual application questions to give some guidance and tips before reviewing the review process and then opening it up to that Q&A. So before we talk about the Woodman Housing Stability Grant for Artists, I wanted to introduce you all to NYFA in case any of you are meeting us for the first time today. And we have four main offerings at NYFA. The first department is our awards and grants, which is the department that distributes over 5.5 million through 15 different grant programs each year, and this grant program is one of those. We offer unrestricted grants, project-based grants, and emergency grant programs to artists and arts organizations based in New York City, like this one, but also New York State as a whole and even nationwide, depending on the program. Next, we have fiscal sponsorship, which allows individual artists and small arts organizations to raise funds through NYFA's 501c3 tax exempt status. So this opens up possibilities to apply for grants and access funding that otherwise wouldn't be available to an individual without this fiscal sponsorship. And we accept applications on a quarterly basis for that if you're interested. We also have our learning department. This offers a wide range of professional development opportunities for artists and arts administrators. These programs include career advice and training, coaching, online workshops, and leadership initiative programs. And then lastly, we have our online resources, which has two main parts to it. The first one is our NYFA Classifieds, which shares jobs in the arts, artist opportunities, and studio and space rentals. We also recently added a volunteer portal to the classifieds, which offers free space for volunteer opportunities that individuals or nonprofits can post. And then the second part of this is our emergency resources page, which is a centralized list of emergency resources for artists across the US that are opportunities outside of NYFA. And we regularly update those and try to make sure that they're up to date with what is going on in the world today. And I am going to drop in the chat links to all four of these sections of our site so that you can check it out after the presentation if any of these are of interest to you. And before I do that, I will pass it back over to Molly.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And just to note, if you joined us late, that this is being recorded, and we will have this information session of recording available on our website, I would think by early next week. So if you miss anything or you want to refer a colleague, just know that that'll be available. A couple of just overall notes about our grant making program and really all of our career development programs. We are overtly committed to supporting artists from every background and at all stages of their creative careers, from emerging to established. We strongly encourage artists of color, LGBTQ plus artists, and artists with disabilities to apply. And in this program, particularly and our other emergency programs, by their nature, we maintain a very strict bubble of confidentiality between the staff and panelists. And we'll talk more about this, but we know that the emergency programs require you to share with us some sensitive and private information, and we want you to be assured that we keep that very close. Much of the personal information is not available to panelists, and we do not announce either the applicants or the recipients of grants through our emergency programs. So this is the second year of this program, which is funded through the Woodman Family Foundation, a New York-based family foundation. And the foundation is dedicated to stewarding the work of three members of the family who were working visual artists, Betty, George, and Francesca. They all worked in New York City in a time when it was more affordable, and they all were very committed to the community, the artist community that they found in New York City, and how vital that was to feeding and nurturing their work and their connections. And so that really is the impetus for the foundation now providing these housing stability grants to allow other artists to kind of have that same working experience. So just a quick overview, these are one-time grants to New York City resident visual artists in need who are facing housing instability. In the second round, we again will be awarding five $30,000 grants. They are paid over 3 years, and they're specifically to allow artists to either remain in or to find new, reliable, affordable rental housing. The overall goal is to allow those recipients to focus on their creative practice and have a greater sense of stability, and so that they can focus their energy and attention more on building and sustaining their careers. A couple of definitions that we'll start with. In this program, we define housing instability as having one or more of these situations currently in your life. That you are living in a rental space, but you don't have a lease or written agreement to guarantee that housing in a long term. That you're currently in a month-to-month or other kind of uncertain housing situation. Or in terms of affordability, that you are paying more than 40% of your annual income in rent and utilities, or that you've recently gotten notice of an increase so that your new obligation is going to be more than 40% of your annual income. And a final condition that may apply is that you have some change in your current life or housing situation that really is driving you to move, whether that is dissolution of a partnership, a domestic partnership, safety concerns, or there's a hazardous condition in your current housing, and it's just imperative that you find a new place to live. The timeline for this program, our applications opened a few weeks ago in mid-February. The application cycle will be open for 8 weeks, so we will be closing on April 14th. And applicants will all be notified later in the summer about the status of their request. These funds, because they're specifically to support rent and utility expenses, are paid out in 3 sums over the 3 years of the grant, and they kind of stagger downwards. So the first year is $12,000, next year is 10, and the third year is 8, with the overall intention being that these funds are really just a supplemental part of your housing budget, and that over this 3-year period, you will be able to build a more sustainable financial framework for you to be able to maintain this housing after the end of the grant. The funds may be used for and only for rental housing, which might include utilities, within the 5 boroughs of New York City. And if you do receive a grant, you will need to provide documentation that is how you use the funds, There will be some additional financial information required, and applicants will need to maintain this residential status within one of the 5 boroughs for the entire life of the grant, and hopefully long afterwards. So again, how the funding can be used are for your existing housing because you have an increase in rent or utilities, or that it's recently, or you've gotten notice that it's going to increase, or you need to move to new housing. You might have already identified where you wish to relocate. That's great. You can talk about that in your application. But if you have not, and you would need to wait and make that determination if and when you received funding, that is fine. That won't be anything against you in the review process. And again, funds can be requested for rent, utilities, and if necessary, security deposits. Not eligible for use of the Woodman grant are mortgage payments or purchase of a home, HOA, homeowners association fees, or expenses incurred outside of the grant periods. So funding can start for expenses starting May of this year and going through summer of 2029. Now we're going to go through these 3 kind of buckets of eligibility because you do need to meet individual, artistic, and emergency eligibility criteria. So we'll go through these one by one. As an individual, you must be 21 years or older on the cycle's deadline of April 14th, and you must currently reside in New York City in one of the 5 boroughs. And you have to have resided in New York City for at least the last 5 consecutive years. You might have moved around within the city, that's fine. And if there was a single short absence of up to 12 months, whether that was for work reasons or personal reasons, that is acceptable. But otherwise, you will need to document your residency in New York for this time period. And again, with the grant, you must remain in the city for 3 years. You also can't be enrolled in a degree-seeking program at the time of application. And we have, this is a program for artists in need. So we have caps on the income and liquid assets that you have, and we'll describe what those figures are in just a moment. And you also, these are 1 in a lifetime grants. So last year's 5 applicants are not eligible to reapply. Okay, here's what we mean by caps. When you submit the application, we will ask you to report your averaged gross income for the last 2 years. So you take your income for 2024 and 2025, average that, and provide a figure. It needs to be $80,000 or lower for an individual, or if you file your federal taxes jointly, no greater than $160,000. That's the average over the 2 years. You also must demonstrate household assets as no greater than $90,720, or for joint filers, $129,600. Those are not random numbers. We follow the policies of the New York Housing Authority and the Housing and Urban Development Department. These are what they list for their, if you were to go into the New York City affordable housing application or lottery program, these are the same caps that they have. So we just mirror theirs. And those mean your liquid assets in terms of any cash and savings and savings or checking accounts, trusts, cash on hand, investments, market value of real property. You cannot already own or have equity in a residence because this is for people who can't afford housing. And you cannot currently be receiving other public rental assistance. We do not count if you have retirement or educational savings accounts. You do not need to include those. Those are set aside and not considered in these asset caps. There are 4 specific artistic disciplines eligible: painting, photography, sculpture, and printmaking, drawing, and book arts. That is because these are the 4 disciplines in which Betty, George, and Francesca Woodman worked. So those have been defined by their family foundation. The funds for this program come from their estate. And so these are specific, although some of our other programs have a much broader definition of disciplines. The second bucket, again, is artistic eligibility. So if you do practice in one or more of those 4 disciplines, the other things that you need to have in your artistic history are have been working in this practice for at least the last 7 years. And you do not need to be a full-time artist or make the bulk of your income through your artwork, but you do need to demonstrate that you have been active in your work on a regular basis, which means at least annual activity in either showing your work publicly in any kind of space. It can be a gallery, a museum, a festival, a community center, public art. Be doing public or community projects, again, where you are perhaps leading a public art program or doing social practice in your artwork. If you've been involved in an artist residency, a fellowship, or received grants for your work. If you have shown or talked about your work on public lectures or panels. And finally, documented art sales. The one caveat here is that art sales cannot be the only activity. They can be part of it because what we'll ask you to do on your resume is to list all of your activity for the last 7 years. Again, if art sales are part of that, that's great, but you need to have at least one public showing of your work as well. It's really that public engagement that's important to this program. Again, we recognize that life happens. And so if you have reduced activity during 2021, 2020 and 2021 during COVID, that's understandable. Or if there's been another 12-month period when you've needed to step away or take a hiatus or had a dry spell, that is fine as well. As long as you can demonstrate that you were working and showing your work publicly prior to 2020. Prior to 2019. Also, presenting your work solely online is not eligible. Again, we're looking for that ability for people to come face-to-face to encounter and interact with your work. One interesting thing in this program is that we do not request and we do not consider work samples. We just look at demonstrated need and the review criteria that the panel looks at as part of your written application, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And the third bucket is the housing instability under which you're currently living. So this just repeats again the types of instability you might be facing. We'll ask you to tell us which one or more of these on your application you are currently experiencing. We do want to make sure that it's clear that if you are in an urgent situation, if you're currently unhoused or in facing imminent loss of your housing, this is not the route for you because this is looking at being just a supplemental part of your housing budget, and because the review process, although we do turn this around as quickly as we can, it still will take some months until we're able to notify you. So if you do have a more urgent need, we do have a publication on the website, which our partners, the Entertainment Community Fund, has provided for us with a slew of all of the New York City, both public and private housing resources and guides. So we really encourage you to take a look at that, download that, and access that for more urgent situations. Just an example of some of the situations that might be eligible. This isn't an exhaustive list, but we just wanted to give you kind of a taste of it. You may have recently received a notice. You're in an existing apartment. It's been great, but you just received notice of a significant rent increase, and it just is out of your budget range. Perhaps you've been living with a family member who's moving into assisted living. Your family home needs to be sold, so you need to find new housing. Perhaps there was a water break in your building and there's mold or some other hazard, and the landlord is not addressing it. It's just not safe for you to stay. Or a situation that we've heard is that you may rent or sublet space. You're on a month-to-month basis, but it's been hard for you to get a long-term lease because of the nature of your work. Your income is sporadic. And by receiving this grant, you would be able to demonstrate to a landlord yes, you have stable income over 36 months. And so it's hopefully more likely that you're able to get a long-term lease. So those are the three buckets. We're now going to walk through the application requirements and the forms that you'll use to apply if you feel that you are eligible. This shows a quick cycle of what the process is. We use Submittable, which many of you may already be familiar with, as our application platform. It's fairly easy to use. It's free to set up an account. You begin your online application, which you can work on over time. You can save your draft, spend as much time as you want on it. The first thing that you'll find when you go to NYFA.org and open the application form is an eligibility screening form. It will kind of ask you all of these questions in these three buckets that we just went through. And that is really to save you time. What we don't want to have happen is someone go through the full application and then ultimately one of these requirements they don't meet and they're ineligible. So please answer the eligibility form honestly and completely to make sure that it is worth your time and energy to submit the full application. If the eligibility form demonstrates that you indeed are eligible for this program, it'll automatically direct you to the full application form. We do all of our work online, both the application process, the panel review process, and the notification process. And then when you submit your application, hopefully before April 14th, you should watch for an email confirmation message that we received it. If for some reason you don't get that, please be in touch with us before the deadline, just in case there was a problem or technical glitch. We would want to make sure that we get your application in. Again, the eligibility form is going to ask you these questions about your individual eligibility, your artistic history, and your housing instability situation. Once you get to the application, I'm just going to give you kind of the snapshot of what you'll be asked to submit on the form. But again, you can work on this on a draft. And we also encourage you to perhaps think about creating your narrative offline in a Word document and then cutting and pasting. That's easy to do as well. That way you just make sure that your application is as clean as possible. So you'll share your contact information. A quick, just factual statement of 50 words or less. What's my current housing situation? I have been in a rent stabilized apartment and it's being sold for co-ops. I was living with my mother and she's moving out of state for care and I need to find my own housing. Just very short and sweet. Then there are 4 questions, and these are the 4 questions that our review panel is going to focus on. You have up to 200 words to describe your current housing instability, to describe your creative practice, how you do your work, how you make your work, and why. The importance of working in New York City to your creative practice. And finally, what would be the potential impact of this grant on your creative practice? Again, this is, although the money is for rent and utilities, the ultimate goal is to support your creative practice and reduce some of the stress and uncertainty around income so that that is the focus. Then some factual information to share. There's a housing status checklist. You just check off yes or no. These are some financial figures you'll need to pull together. What is your projected annual housing expense for 2026? And what's your projected total income? This can be rounded numbers, that's fine. Then we will want your actual adjusted gross income. Those again should be the figures that you or your adjusted gross income on your 2 most recent federal tax filings. You add those, divide it by 2, that's your average. Then you will also ask you to upload your 2 most recent federal tax filings. Please feel free to black out, redact Social Security numbers and sensitive information. Then we'll need you to list your approximate total household assets. There's a simple table that will say how much is currently in your checking account, how much is in your savings account, how much is in your investment account if you have one. There's another access to resources checklist. Again, just some yes or no answers. Uploading your current resume, bio, or CV. This, I think, is the one that caught the most people up last year. And in the application, it gives you some very specific instructions, again, because we're looking for particularly that 7-year history. You can submit your entire resume. If you've been working for 30 years, that's great. We're not asking you to do a special resume for us, but for at least the last 7 years, we need to know what your activity has been. Has it been an exhibit? Has it been a public art piece? Has it been a lecture? Where it happened, when it happened. So those facts, what happened, when, and where. So we have that list for the last 7 years. And finally, just certifying that everything in the application is true. Again, you can do all of this as a draft and save it over time. We really actually recommend that you take your time. You do not need to be a professional grant writer to be successful in this program, but you do want to take the time to, make sure that you are making your case and telling your story clearly in your responses. Okay, again, this is a reminder about the importance of getting all those details on your application, all of those specific events for the public to experience or encounter your work. We need to see at least one opportunity or activity annually. Again, list the year, the location, and the title. If some of the activity that you want to list are for sales, again, it needs to be by, tell us what year it was sold, the title of the work, and the method. Was it, a sale direct to client? Was it through a gallery? Was it at a fair or festival? That kind of thing. Again, if there is a gap in time, either during COVID or separately for a 12-month period, that's fine. We will understand that. And again, no work samples are required. You do not need to submit your portfolio or anything like that. Again, and submit copies of your two most recent 1040s and any schedules, redacting your social security number if you would, please. So again, we use Submittable as our platform. If you do require an accommodation due to a disability, if you need assistance with the online application or need to use a paper application, we're happy to accommodate you, but please give us at least 2 weeks notice. Reach out to us at apply@NYFA.org because we want to make sure that we have enough time to get you what you need, get back your information into the system before the deadline. And again, take the time needed. Applying quickly or early does not advantage you in any way. The applications all go to the panel at once they've been reviewed by staff. So take the time to tell a complete story. There are 4 questions to answer. Although you obviously want to be consistent, don't repeat information. Use the opportunity, use the space that you're provided to give us and give the panel information. You don't need to use the entire 200 words for each response, but take the opportunity to tell your unique story because they'll be looking at a lot of applications and you want them to understand your particular situation, your work, your practice. Last advice, submit on time. Submittable automatically shuts off the application at 5 p.m. Eastern on April 14th. We are not able to make exceptions. So please, if at all possible, submit in advance of the deadline. If there is a technical problem or an outage on your end, we cannot accept a late application. Again, you should receive an automated email confirming we've received it. If not, please feel free to check with us to make sure it came in. Once it comes in, we want to be fully transparent about what happens in terms of the decision-making process. So the first thing is that staff reviews it for completeness and eligibility. Making sure that the artistic history is there, that all the financial tables have been completed, that all the answers have been responded to. All of the eligible and complete applications then go to our external review panel. So we use a peer panel process. They review and score the applications based on the evaluation criteria, which are listed at the bottom. They simply do a numeric score on how strongly you've made the case that you have an unstable housing situation. that you have a commitment to a New York City-based art practice, and that you have clearly made a case for the impact of these grant funds on your creative practice and sustainability. Again, our panelists signed a confidentiality agreement. They do not see names of applicants, but regardless, they agree not to share any information about the process or the applications. Based on all of the scores, we average those. The top scoring applications get put into a lottery. And this is a process that we've been doing for some years now with all of our kind of urgent and emergency grants program, and we've adopted that for this program. Honestly, when we get to these top tier of applications, all of those who reach that step, honestly, are worthy of receiving funds. And so rather than try to tussle it out one-on-one, we put it into a random lottery and let the universe decide. Those top scoring applications, then the last step are that we do Zoom interviews with finalists, to confirm full eligibility. And then in late summer, we will notify everyone we'll be making 5 awards and let everyone else know their status. So that is our presentation. I know that Sarah has been tracking some questions, which I don't have 3 screens, Sarah, so I can't see them. So I'll ask you to read them out and we can answer them together.
That sounds great. Thanks for that presentation, Molly. We just have 2 questions right now, and I'll see if some more come in. But the first one is, hi, should the annual projected housing expense for 2026 include utilities too?
Yes, it's fine to include utilities.
Great. And then the other one, which I think you actually just answered after they asked it, but how many grants are awarded?
We have funding this year to award 5 grants. Again, they're $30,000 spread out over 3 years. So we had 5 in our first cycle last year. We have 5 more that we'll award this year, and it'll be funded over that 3 years.
All right. Well, we'll just give it a minute to see if any others come through. I feel like you were able to cover a lot through that. So thank you, Molly.
Great, great. Well, while we wait for that, I'm sorry, I have a cat assistant with me today. Um, all of the application information is available at NYFA.org. If you click on programs, grant programs, you'll see the Woodman section. Again, if you feel that this application process isn't necessarily for you or doesn't meet your needs, we do have the that great New York City housing resource guide that is downloadable in this section of the website that the Entertainment Community Fund has put together. You can also look at our emergency resources section, which Sarah mentioned at the top. This has all kinds of financial, social service, legal, all kinds of resources from all over the country that you might want to look through. And if you still have questions, reach out to us at apply@NYFA.org and we'll get back with you as quickly as we can.
Yes, and for those who are still in the room, all of those web pages are linked in the chat. And I'll also, we should make a note, Molly, to add those links to the resources on our YouTube too, for anyone who's watching after the fact on the recorded version. We did get one more question. Oh, here we go. So, do I need to be a US citizen to apply? I wonder if I missed this info. Thank you.
Question, you do not. You just need to be a US resident, and you will be asked if you are awarded a grant to demonstrate to document that you have lived in one of the 5 boroughs or lived within the 5 boroughs over the last 5 years.
Yes, and then the only other logistical thing that you would need to provide in relation to that, if you are awarded, is that you do need to fill out a W-9 or a W-8 Ben form to receive funds, and you will receive a 1099 at the end of the year. Okay, another one. If 2 artists live under the same roof but would like to apply separately, may they use the same address?
Yes, you may use the same address. If you are roommates, you should just list your own portion of the rent and utilities obligation. If you are domestic partners and you file your taxes jointly, you would each need to submit that same information about your family assets and tax information.
And one more here. We have, if my housing doesn't allow for studio space, can I include rental of studio space with my rent expense?
That's a great question. And the answer, I believe, Sarah, is no. That this is, although we understand that we hope this program ultimately serves your creative practice, that is through supporting housing support, not for studio rental.
That's correct. Yes.
And I'll put in a plug here. If you think of a question after this ends, there is a whole FAQs. We've tried to address them in any of these that came up today. We will add to our FAQs, but feel free to look there if you have questions. And again, if any of them are not answered, please reach out to us by email.
Yes. We just got another one too. Will you contact my landlord for verification? I may not want him to know that I am receiving any assistance, lest he decide not to renew my lease.
No, we only interact with the artists themselves. We do not contact financial institutions, landlords. Um, our The same thing, just so that you know, with our medical and dance emergency grants, we also never interact with medical providers. We just work directly with the artists for confidentiality reasons.
Yes. Yes, and we will in those Zoom interviews, the finalist interviews that Molly, you mentioned, we will ask for verification of documents from you yourself, but as you've mentioned, we won't reach out to anyone else. Um, okay, I'm not sure if we have a perfect answer to this because I'm not super familiar with this type of co-op, but Molly, maybe you know. What if you are in a co-op that acts as a rental? The apartments have no equity and we can't sell them. When behind in rent, we are taken to housing court. So it sounds like it's functioning as a rental. I feel like we would need to look into this.
Yes, I'm not sure we've run into that before. Um, but if you own it
Oh,
and
and
have,
sorry, they just added also we can be evicted. There is no mortgage. Hmm.
hmm,
And
we might,
they added a name of it, Mitchell Llama. So Molly, maybe.
okay, yes, yes, yes. I've heard of this, but I'm not really knowledgeable about it. So let us look into that and we'll add it to the FAQs. And if you want to reach out to us by email, we can send you the response directly once we do a little bit more digging. But yeah, I know that's one of the housing programs in the city. So we'd have to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I have non-filing documents from the IRS. My income didn't meet the tax threshold, so I haven't filed the taxes. Can I submit that?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's everything for now. We can give it just one more minute again in case someone's typing. But yeah, those are all great questions. And for the more personalized ones, definitely reach out over email so that we can make sure we're giving you the appropriate info for your situation.
Well, just as we start to wrap up, a reminder, the deadline is 5 p.m. Eastern on April 14th. Please don't wait until 4:59 to hit send. You can work on your application over time and save it as a draft. And again, if you have any questions, first look into our FAQs. But if they're not addressed there, or if something specific has come up today, just reach out to us at apply@nifa.org and we will get the answer back to you as quickly as we can.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect spot to end. And thank you to everyone who joined and stayed on, and for anyone who is watching the recording after the fact.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you do. Take care.
Bye.